Welcome back to City and State TV. I'm Morgan Pehme here with my friend and colleague, Gerson Borrero. We're joined now by Assemblyman Marcos Crespo. Assemblyman, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
From the Bronx.
From the Bronx, Boogie Down Bronx. That's right. So, Assemblyman, you wrote an op-ed for our special issue, for the SOMOS issue, focusing upon the necessity to pay attention to poverty in the Latino community and the education gap. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, the numbers are pretty scary. I mean, look, we do so much work up in Albany on various policy issues, but when it comes to the basics, we seem to be falling behind. And I don't know if it's that we're losing track of what's important or just not accomplishing enough, but the numbers continue. The income inequality that de Blasio has put on the map as a topic of conversation is very real, and we see it in the numbers. The correlation between educational achievement in our community, poverty, where children are failing, there is a growing inequality in terms of incomes in those communities and the social issues that come with that. It's concerning. It's concerning. It's one of the reasons why I was proud to join my colleagues today calling for an increase in the minimum wage. But that's just one small piece of a much bigger puzzle that we have to address. But it's really, we can't talk about empowerment in the Latino community without addressing access to opportunity. Education is the key to that, and making sure that families can provide for their children.
You know, and I wonder about that, and not passing judgment one way or the other on the DREAM Act, but it seems to me that, like, when we ask what should be the priorities of this session, the first thing we hear is the DREAM Act, the DREAM Act, the DREAM Act, and it seems like that's a kind of narrow, one-note focus that might take attention away from these tremendous plights of the education gap, of poverty, of the things that you address in your op-ed.
I think, look, for those of us that have been serving in Albany for some time, we need to start to see some achievement. We need to reach some goals. We need to get something done. I think the DREAM Act, not only is it a good bill and what it does, but also it's a marker, so to speak. It's one of those banners that once we accomplish that, it goes to show that we can deliver. And I think we feel we're so close to getting it done, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're going to continue to hear us prioritize it. It's a bill we believe in, but you're right. There's a lot more that we need to be doing when it comes to education and access. I've been pushing the state, and I'm grateful that they've taken some steps to correct the issues of bilingual education across the state. Even in the city of New York, where we have Latino representation in government, and we have minorities who are principals and heads of, working with the regions and superintendents, we still see schools that try and circumvent the requirement to provide bilingual students with the resources they need. And they do so because they rather, they're more concerned with the test scores, and they rather, have an extra teacher and not address the issues of the L students. That shouldn't be happening anywhere. If that's happening in New York City, imagine across the state. So those are things that I'm proud that the state is moving in the right direction.
But one of the things, the purposes of this conference has always, in theory, to be able to come up with an agenda, to come up with some kind of substantive results, an A to Z, if you will, or an ABC. That has never really happened coming out of this conference. It doesn't look so far that there's more discussion on some serious subjects coming up in this next legislative session. What do you have in mind? Marcos Crespo is representing the Bronx, being very clear on what you wrote about in City and State. What would you like to have to take for this conference to take into the next session, if in fact that has even come up as a purpose that you say on Sunday when you return back home, I'm carrying this, or we're carrying this together as the SOMOS conference, the fall conference of 2014.
You know what, you bring a good point. There's been a lot of good dialogue here on a number of important issues, more so issues that we're reacting to because of the times, or other things that are coming up, or other issues that other leaders are putting on the agenda. And I think we need to do a better job of creating our own agenda, identifying what that agenda is, and making sure that that's being, part of the conversation. You're right. I don't think we've done enough of a good job on that. I think we need to do better. I think as a Latino delegation in Albany, we have to come up with a better strategy. We have to, more than that, execute that strategy. And that's been a problem. DREAM Act is important, but there's a lot of other things that we need to work on. If you ask me, I think, I know earlier it's been discussed, and it is an important issue in my community, rent regulations, housing protections. We need people to remain in their homes and find it affordable. I have seniors who are on fixed income, Social Security, who can't afford even the so-called affordable housing that's built. They don't qualify for it. And so we need to come up with creative solutions that help these families, whether it's, and I know we have a program, we need to actually use it. It's a home sharing program for seniors to maybe be roommates. I mean, if that's what it's gonna take to house them appropriately. We have the issues with the homeless families in my community. I have building after building that is home to shelters and cluster sites. These are the conditions that we can't continue to exist. Look, we've talked a lot about voter turnout and apathy. And I truly believe that it's, we're getting so caught up in responding to other people's issues that we're not setting our own agenda. And by doing so, the average citizen in our districts doesn't feel connected to any of the things they hear us talking about. They don't see how that impacts their life, and they'll ask us, what have you done for me? What does that have to do with me? And so they want us to get back to the basics. When we talk about poverty and income and access to education opportunity, that's what it is. Another issue that traditionally hasn't been looked at as ours, the interest of businesses. A lot of the business council tends to work with the Republican Party. We talk about that. But if you look at the growth in business development, new business creation, it's been minority business, mom and pop shops that have opened up. They're the ones that provide the jobs in the communities. We're not doing enough to help the business community, and this should be a collective issue. It shouldn't just be a Republican issue. That's an important issue for us as well. Where we want regulations, but we don't want regulations to burden business to the point that they spend more time. One fine that they get will shut them down. And these are the kind of things that are real to us and are going to resonate with the average person in our community. And I think reconnect them to why they should be involved and why they should pay attention to what we're doing, and also come out and vote.
So the conference right now, as of this date, we got 2 days left. You don't see anything gelling, anything coming up here?
No. I think there's been some good work. Today there was some great workshops. I know I'm chairing one tomorrow to continue a conversation we've been having, for example, with the unaccompanied minors. We are doing a workshop on this issue. And what's come out of some of the conversations we've had is some cohesion in terms of requesting a special grant through the state, where we're going to call on the governor to provide some additional funding for school districts across the state who are taking in the majority of these unaccompanied minors. We're realistic to the fact that for a lot of school districts, this is a new endeavor, and it's going to require some extra funding to put these, get the educators that have the technical know-how working with these children in place. And so we want the special grant to also take a little bit of the political discussion and the fodder from some of the anti-immigrant groups in those communities, Long Island, in upstate New York, Westchester. A lot of Central American families have grown in those communities, but they feel isolated, they feel alone. So if we can provide the funding, we take one argument away from those anti-immigrant groups, and we're able to help those school districts meet the needs of those children. To us, that's important. That's something I've talked to a number of people at this conference about, and I think I'm going to get a lot of support pushing that agenda. So, and like that, I know different members are having conversations around important issues. So I'm sure by the end of this conference, there'll be a little bit more of a clear-cut agenda, and we hope to develop that further. Next year, I take over as chair of this task force, and one of the things I've always had in mind is to bring back more policy-oriented task force. I remember under Peter Rivera's leadership, we used to do that very efficiently and consistently. There were discussions about issues that otherwise we wouldn't think about. For example, I'll never forget going to workshops with the pharmaceutical industry, talking to us about physician prevail and the importance of that and what that meant to the Latino community. I would have never thought that was an important issue for us. But once explained, it was one of those issues that Latinos would always get up in conference and defend because of how many of our members in our community who, for language issues or just because they trust, the system, ended up taking the wrong medications. Because they didn't know that they had the right to fight for the physician to ultimately determine what they should get and not an insurance company or bureaucrat. So these are the kind of things that we need to do more of, and I hope I can bring that back.
Yeah, of course, with the Latino population growing in the country and in the state, it's a matter of demographic destiny that Latinos are going to grow in political power in this country. And as we see this rise of political power, it seems like SOMOS could be this opportunity to set the legislative agenda moving into January. And in terms of taking over the task force and looking at SOMOS in the long term, what needs to occur here in order for this conference to really have an impact in Albany?
I'm glad you asked. Two things. Yes, we're growing in numbers. People talk about us as a swing vote that's gonna, but it always seems like at the end of the day, our top issues don't make the cut. So as much concern there is about the Hispanic vote and Hispanic leaders and Hispanic representation, what does that ultimately mean if we're not accomplishing the goals that are going to really help and empower our community? this conference, I think it's a great gathering of leaders, and a lot of good discussions happen, whether they happen in the workshop or whether they happen at the restaurant, they're happening, and that's important. But I also think we need to go back to the basics. We need to bring this conversation back into communities. One of the things that I look forward to doing is not just waiting for those that can travel and afford to go to Albany and be a part of the workshops there, but actually regionalize. Let's bring the conversation to the neighborhoods. Let's work with CUNY and SUNY. Let's host workshops in the community. We get the students and the families in their neighborhoods to be a part of that discussion, and then use our time in Albany to talk about the highlights of those conversations, as opposed to waiting until we're up there and trying to impress one another with our respective speeches. I think we need to just come back to that. Grassroots, look, all between new rules and the expense of transporting people, you go to the SOMOS conference in Albany and you don't see the neighborhood there anymore. You don't see constituents participating. That's something that we have to bring back, because then we can't set an agenda without really hearing from our communities and making them a part of that movement and that conversation. I also think that the leaders that be, whether it's the governor, the mayor, if we can't mobilize our neighborhoods, we're never going to get our fair share.
You're right about that disconnect. Like, so many times these conferences are like mental masturbation, and it's like, I've been saying at City and States forums recently that I was like, I want it to be like Clinton Global Initiative. It's like, I want us to leave the forum with some palpable takeaway, that we accomplished something out of it. And I was wondering, we had from the last midterm election, we had 1 million votes drop off. We clearly have our regular people are disengaged from the process. There was this hope that Latino voters would come out in larger number. There was only a slight uptick. Why is it that we can't engage people? Is it because our politics is so removed from the priorities of regular people?
I think that's a big part of it, not the only thing. Look, that apathy is evident not just here in New York, it's happening across the country. It's happening in different demographics, so it's not just the Hispanic community or minority communities. Voter turnout is just pathetic everywhere, yes, I do think that. But
it's the worst in New York.
It is, and in our neighborhoods. Look, I tell people in my district all the time, I'm like, I'm not proud of my election. I won. If you look at the percentages, I'm extremely proud. When you look at the raw numbers, I'd rather not even talk about it. It is embarrassing, and I'm not proud of that, and I'm not happy about it either. I tell people I educate people in my community. The Bronx has the highest concentration of Democratic voters. It's the reason why we were the county, the number one county across the country in terms of the turnout for Obama in his first and second race. At the end of the day, we turn out in big numbers. We did so for Cuomo as well. But the problem is, and I tell my community, you can't vote. I'm a proud Democrat, but you can't vote Democrat blindly. You have to know who are the candidates. The primary is the most important election in my district. I want people to come out in the primary. Some of them say, "Oh, we got your back. We can't let this Republican say." I'm like, look, you could put Jesus Christ to run in my district as a Republican. I might just beat him. Those are the numbers.
That's the takeaway from this interview. Marcos Crespo could beat Jesus Christ.
Whoa. Lord, sorry. You know what I mean.
We'll be back on City and State TV, streaming live from the conference 2014. SOMOS all the way.
Assemblyman Marcos Crespo, thank you so much for joining us.